Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coach Replay Show. I'm here today with two special guests. They've been on our show before last season. They were a part of our amazing Better Together Summit this past summer, and they're back on today with, I just love the connection of our episode today, harnessing the power of Ted Lasso when engaging in video coaching. The Hilton CSD story with Casey and Jim. So welcome back, gentlemen. So great to have you on. I'd love if you would just start for the folks who haven't seen you in one of our episodes before or aren't familiar with your book or your work. I would love if you just took a few moments to tell everyone a little bit about who you are.
All right, I'll defer to Jim. You can start out.
Well, we're so privileged to be with all you good folks out there, and we're dedicating this to all the great educators who are working tirelessly for kids each and every day. Despite so many challenges, you're relentless about always being there for children. So thank you, each and every one of you. Jim Thompson, I'm a grandpa to James Joseph, and immediately after that, I'm so darn proud of my teaching background. I was an elementary teacher, I was a high school teacher, and I was a middle school teacher. And I loved every bit of it. I learned so much about kids and so much about what to do and what not to do during those years. And hopefully banked on those during my 20 years as a principal. I was my daughter's elementary principal. She had her college essay was how I survived being the principal's daughter. And I had 5 assistant principals, and the last one was this great guy, full of promise, full of leadership, a rock and roll advocate for kids, and that was Kosiorek. And so at 15 years of college teaching experience, and for the last decade, and I, Casey, have been looking at this question, what does improvement look like? And we have a big focus on helping teachers to impact student learning through video reflection and partnership coaching. So that's a little bit about Jim Thompson.
Thanks,
All right,
Jim.
my name's Casey Kosiorek. Yes, Jim was the guy that gave me a chance many moons ago to be an assistant principal and break in from the classroom to administration. And I would echo his sentiments tonight and today that this is one of the most difficult times to be in education, and just kudos to our teachers because you're the ones in the front lines doing what's best for kids. You know, through this pandemic, whether we're fully remote, whether it's a hybrid model, and now many schools across the country have students in person. But there's all of that collateral damage along the way. So classroom management is more challenging, building relationships, heck, all that before we even get to the content that we're looking to present to the students. So just a real difficult time. I know we're coming up on the holiday season, and I think everyone deserves some time to unplug. So I hope you have an opportunity to do that. But I've taught, I've coached, and I've been an administrator basically up the rung from assistant principal. I served as a superintendent in a small rural school. I currently serve as the superintendent, as you can see, at the Hilton Central School District, which is in New York State. And we're a mid-sized district, 4,500 students, roughly 900 employees. But one of the things when we're working through some of the trauma that we're dealing with, and we were just talking about all of the unfortunate things that we have to overcome with TikTok and what's going on there. But really one of the great things to keep everybody grounded is having that opportunity to talk about instruction and how to get better. So when I worked with Jim and I parted ways a little bit once he retired, but we remained friends. We would have coffee together. I was on my way out from being a principal to move to a superintendency, and I was evaluating a teacher, and that teacher was finishing up his teaching time and moving into administration. And we said, what the heck, let's try something different for your evaluation. What if we were to use a video camera? We'll record your lesson and we'll both reflect on it. So just to let you know, the technology was not where it is now. It was a really small DVD disc that we both took home. We actually picked up a camera from Walmart and we set it up on a tripod and we captured it. And one of the most powerful things when we met to break it down the first 30 minutes of the conversation was this teacher talking about all the things that they saw that they wanted to improve. So we almost had to pump the brakes and say, okay, I know that you have a lot of things. You're an overachiever. You want to get better. But one of the cool things was sometimes as an evaluator, there is what's this person going to tell me as my evaluator? I'm a teacher. I know my craft. So the power of video is pretty awesome in the sense that you get to see it with your own eyes, and then really anchoring into a lot of Jim Knight's work. And even that overarching flair of Ted Lasso is we're going to partner, we're going to be vulnerable, and we're going to work together, because that's really where true reflection and improvement happens. But so happy to be on the show again. Thanks to Cory and all the great people at Sibme.
Yeah. And, you know, what's so cool about this is, you know, we find so many commonalities between y'all's story. It's so great to hear that you guys continue to stay connected with each other as individuals and professionals. So that's amazing. But then also to hear the impact as you are continuing to focus on how do we, and that's really our mission here. It's part of the mission here of the Coach Replay Show, is to support anybody who's going to watch. But most of our viewers are instructional coaches, instructional leaders, some with the title of campus or district administrators, some just lead teachers, who really just want to support others and continue to grow as they do that. And so part of what we do here at the Coach Replay Show is talk a little bit about the use of video and kind of debunk some of those myths around how it's highly evaluative. And, you know, it's vulnerable, definitely, but it's so, so powerful. So I love hearing that in your story, and the fact that we're going to get to talk a little bit about that today. And I love that you, again, have this kind of connection on the wisdom of Ted Lasso, being curious, not judgmental, as we think about the use of video in professional learning, whether we are coaching or, you know, looking at evaluation, or simply prompting a teacher to reflect a little bit and bring their own thoughts about their craft. As you mentioned, Casey, we know our craft when we're in that classroom, and we know our students, and it's important that we draw on our own wisdom as a part of this. How do we remain in the driver's seat of our own professional learning and our own goals, and partner with someone who's going to be able to help us kind of get to that destination, go along that journey. So, gentlemen, where do we start? Where do we begin as we think about harnessing the power of Ted Lasso when we're thinking about using video for coaching and professional learning?
Well, I love one of those Ted Lasso quotes. One of his players says, "Coach, I got the feeling we're not in Kansas anymore." We just, you know, the things are not the same. After March 20th of 2020, the world turned upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Time turned upside down, but we're still have to be there for kids, and how do we help kids learn? And the first thing we have to do, I think, in any kind of improvement plan is to find out, well, where are we right now?
Mm-hmm.
What is our current identity? What's our current reality? And one of the silver linings, if there are any, from the pandemic is a lot of teachers for the first time started using video. Started recording themselves, whether it be on Zoom or whatever. So they started taking the scary out of, so they were jumping on that journey already. And a lot of them had those eurekas, those ahas, those epiphanies, like, wow, I didn't know I was doing that. Wow, I didn't know I was talking a lot. Wow, I didn't know I was asking questions and then answering them all myself. So I think that kind of, the train's already been moving. So many teachers have really gotten into video, some really by accident. What do you think?
Well, absolutely, I agree, and I think going back to Ted Lasso, one of the sign above the door, believe, and with so much negativity that we're trying to overcome with the pandemic, and with students coming to us with so many different needs, social, emotional. The learning loss, if you will, from having their parents teach them while they were working. If you were in a portion of the country that was fully locked down, it is to believe. Right now, it's difficult for everyone involved, and we just have to keep that optimism to continue to believe. But also, as Ted Lasso says, there's an episode where a player is talking about football, as in European football, but football is life, soccer is life, so instruction is life, and we have to be okay with ourselves. And this world of high achieving is extremely important, but sometimes I think we put too much pressure on ourselves to achieve, and a perfectionist type feeling, and that's not the case. It's truly about the journey, not always about all of the results. Yes, it's important for results, and we want students to learn and make progress, but I think we need to kind of take a deep breath. And I know, at least in New York State, when we look at the teacher evaluation system, it's really, really poorly crafted. So there is really nothing that comes out of that. I guess it serves a purpose for employment decisions. But when we're really talking about the limited amount of time that we have with teaching staff and how we want to grow and improve in different facets, it certainly doesn't achieve that. So if that's the objective, it fails miserably. And I think we can take the time and really come together as a team and a family through the use of video and the use of coaching. And I think one of the big takeaways and silver linings here is being vulnerable and being able to have a trusted colleague to partner, learn with. So let's connect with others in a non-judgmental a way, and be able to discuss what went well, what didn't go well. I know Jim says this all the time. Show us your choppy water. Show us your chop. Nobody wants to see the dog and pony show. I've bribed my children with a pizza party when the administrator comes in, and we're going to have a great lesson, and they're catatonic. No one's even going to move. And the administrator comes in, writes up the lesson. Hey, awesome, great teaching. Okay, fine. But that doesn't improve your craft. You have to be reflective, and you have to really look at what's going well and celebrate it, and then areas for growth, because that's really how we're going to improve the way that we teach children.
Yeah, I mean, so many good points there. And, Jim, I've seen the same thing with the teachers I worked with. And it was kind of the silver lining I was looking for at the start of our pandemic, where, really were two things. One, that we would start using technology and realizing technology can be used in more meaningful ways. I know back in Texas, we would complete I think it was called the STAR. It was a technology survey, and did you use technology? And a lot of folks would get by and saying, yeah, I did. I used my projector this year, right? I used something, but really being able, when I first found video about 13 years ago, I accidentally found it for my classroom. It was as I was recording lessons so that my students could go back and play them back. And eventually that led into blended learning. So I was looking at the silver lining of teachers being able to really be able to realize and harness the power of technology to use more blended learning strategies, whether in person or remote, but then also them being able to see themselves teaching a little bit more and becoming more comfortable with the use of video. So we've seen that same kind of silver lining here. It makes it a lot easier, but still figuring out how do we really kind of harness the power of video. And one thing I know that in your notes and kind of in our description for today's episode, we talk about, where we are right now and where we've been, right? As Jim mentioned, the world's turned upside down, but it continues to turn. It continues to rotate and spin on its axis. So things are still moving, and we're continuing to go through more and more traumatic events, it feels like. And that means that our coaching is more important than ever right now, right? And I really want to talk about this idea of, and you mentioned this a little bit, Casey, as well, taking a moment to breathe. And how are we doing that? So tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that and the importance of our coaches doing so.
I think it's just really, and I'll turn over to Jim quickly, because he's really doing a lot of the work here in Hilton with our coaches. It's being okay with being not okay. So it's really wrapping your head around the fact that although often our stress is self-imposed on ourselves, and many educators are perfectionists. How many times have you gone into a classroom or visit with an administrator, and clearly we want people to have high expectations. We want students to achieve. But I think at this point in time, when I say take a break, take a deep breath, that by moving in that pace, we are going to fall short. We're going to, if we continue on with that approach, we need to, if there's a silver lining from the pandemic and then the use of video and coaching, it's take a deep breath. Let's try some things. Let's understand that it's okay to make mistakes. When you think about, you take a look at all types of different leadership quotes and learning quotes, and failure is an important part in the learning cycle. So if we never come to terms with the fact that failure isn't really failure, but it's the ability to learn, that's the shift that we often try to make with video as well. Because when you're working with folks, well, I'm a little uncomfortable being on the video. But if you can ensure to everyone that people are all the same mindset of vulnerability and growth, and it's confidential and it's not a part of their evaluation, and possibly, I know videos used in different models, but in our model, the principal who does the evaluation never sees the video. So, it's you're a priest, your rabbi, your counselor, whatever model you want to think of, that's your video coach. So you're becoming friends and you're creating a partnership. And often the coach is learning alongside of you, and you problem solve and you look at different instructional strategies. You try to implement them. You reflect again. So I think that when we talk about taking a deep breath, it is understanding that none of us are perfect and none of us will ever be perfect. And although we have high expectations for ourselves as instructors, it's okay to roll around in the mud and get dirty, because that's really how we're going to grow. And hopefully we're going to enjoy the journey as well as we're growing.
Yeah. Let me throw in a Ted Lasso quote here. He says, for me, success is not about the wins and losses. It's about helping these young fellas be the best versions of themselves on and off the field. And, that's what Jim Knight talks about. Well, how do we help each other be a better version of ourselves? What does it look like? And in this time, a lot of it is extending grace to each other, asking, how are you doing? And for me as a coach, I got to work on the fact of embracing silence and just waiting for that story to come forward. There's a book called Evocative Coaching by Shannon Moran, and they say that coaching only starts when trust is developed to the extent that the teacher starts sharing their story. And teachers got stories to share.
Yeah.
They got stories to share. And some of this is just extending some grace, embracing the silence, waiting for the stories to come, building that trust. And it's not a linear piece. It whatsoever never was before, and it definitely isn't now. And I think that's what being vulnerable, portraying that vulnerability. But that's how I think you're really building those human connections that are so important.
Yeah, it really, and especially, during the past, year and a half, almost 2 years now that we've been dealing with this pandemic and the ongoing slot of things that continue to come our way. And this need to feel like we've got it and everybody feels like a fish out of water. They continue. This is yet again another atypical year where things just don't feel like they did. I'm in my classroom and I've got my students here, but it looks different, and I have to manage not just the classroom, but I've got to keep a record of who's close contact and for how long, and all of the things that they're trying to manage, as well as the students who are in school today and out of school tomorrow for the next however many days. So there's a lot there, and there's a lot happening personally with many of our teachers that used to, another coach I was talking with the other day said, it used to feel like there was more separation between, personal and professional lives, even though, strangely enough, as educators, we own similar to the football players in Ted Lasso's series where, football is life, teaching is life for many of us, but it never really, teaching seeps into our personal life, but our personal life doesn't always seep into our teaching. And they've noticed really that they're really having to help their teachers find a bigger balance, because they've got to better balance the personal things, the things that are happening, the health, just the mental care, the physical care of themselves, so that they can be there for their students. And I think y'all were talking a little bit before about this idea of the oxygen mask. And so I'd love for y'all to talk a little bit about this kind of analogy of using the oxygen mask, and how we can make sure as coaches we're doing that ourselves first. How do we really honor that, so that way we have the time to sit in the silence and wait for the stories, and be okay with the imperfection of not only ourselves but our teachers, and help them be okay with it, because that calm, collected feeling I think can also transfer into our teachers.
Well, personal wellness has always been important. And for servant leaders like Casey and all of us on right here now, sometimes we feel guilty about saying we need to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first. We feel guilty and like, oh my God, that doesn't sound right. Well, if we're not okay, then how are we going to help somebody else okay? And that's one of the things we talk to our coaches about. Our coaches is self-care. As self-care, taking care of yourself. How are you doing? And not being afraid to express your vulnerability. In our coaching model, the coach is not the expert. The coach is a partner sharing expertise. So we don't have to have all the answers. And I think it's okay to come out and say, we don't have them. We don't have all, but in collaboration and dialogue and working together, I'm pretty sure we can work through this, even though it's not a linear journey. But I think with our coaches, self-care is so very important. And we can't feel guilty about the fact of saying we need to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first.
Absolutely. Something that we've practiced here most recently in the last year or so is challenging our coaches, our teachers, and administrators. Coaches and administrators, because often they're 12 months in our structure, where our teachers do have some built-in opportunity to unplug, but staying off email and staying off text messaging. And although social media, when you're looking to pick up educational strategies, is great, is unplugging from those things, being present for your family. So we have a holiday coming up, and are you reading the latest strategies on Twitter, or are you engaged with your significant other or your family? So really taking, once again, I think going back to the previous statement of it's okay to not be okay, or it's okay not to always be perfect, is take those times to unplug. Because if you don't, when it comes time for that next coaching conversation, you may not be able to give your best to that person because you're stressed and you're not rested, and you haven't had an opportunity to work through things that you need to work through. So I think that that's important too. And I always tell our administration and our coaches, if it's important, pick up the phone and call. Other than that, try to stay off some of those things, because it's real easy to create additional stress that doesn't necessarily have to happen. And also from our coaching model, you want to keep things as simple as possible. Lencioni is an author, and he's more in the business world. You may be aware of him, but he talks about the sophistication bias. And sometimes we make things a little more difficult than they need to be. And when you can keep things basic and you can keep things simple, you are going to be of better mind, spirit, and heart to do the great work that we need to do as educators, as teachers, coaches, and administrators.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so important. And again, taking a time to pause and realize it's okay and unplug. And again, I think that feeds right into what we were talking about just before that, of really allowing yourself, that allows you a better opportunity, better condition to be able to really be present and genuine in the conversation. And I think that's the big piece that I've always appreciated as I hear about how you all use video coaching and use video. I mean, you've mentioned a few examples of this to support the trustworthiness and the vulnerability of your teachers. Is you don't have to see the video, right? It's about them seeing themselves, them having that artifact, that opportunity to reflect, and then coming together to have a conversation, as opposed to, here's my video, right? Which feels very much like I came in and I watched you and here's some of my notes. It's easy for the folks that I know that kind of get started using video. They feel like they have to see the video. They've got to be the one to capture it so they can do the same thing. I watched your video. Here's some of my notes. What do you think? When really it can be just record yourself. Take a few moments to just take a break, record yourself, take it all in, and then let's chat about it. Let's talk about the things that you identified and you notice. And that really is that genuine kind of partnership piece. But if I am stressed as the instructional leader, the coach, whatever title I wear in that coaching position, about the gap that's continuing to grow and the numbers of things and all of that, I'm going to be, I've been in this position where I felt the urgency to kind of push, like when I was in the classroom and I felt that kind of the need to stay on pace as opposed to stay with my students. And I would just run through my lessons going, I know some aren't with me, but I'll catch them up later. And that's really not the best way to do things, right? So I think this also allows us some opportunity to do that. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about some key things that you do to be able to harness the power of coaching to support these genuine, trustworthy conversations, things like not having to necessarily see the video, and more lean on the teacher seeing their own video. What other things do you have? Ideas?
Our coaching model really is a partnership. And we use Harvard's Best Foot Forward research with the selfie.
Yes.
We ask our teachers to do a selfie and then ask them to look at it. And a huge, powerful piece comes next. We ask them to identify a goal important to them, and one which would impact instruction to work on. So who now has voice? Who now has ownership? Who now has a sense of belonging to this whole process? It's the teacher. It's the teacher. I was a principal for 20 years, and I was the New York State Elementary Principal of the Year, so it must have been I did a couple of things well. But Cory, I had to do about 80, 90 evaluations a year. And, it come time for the evaluation conference, I made coffee. I put cinnamon in the coffee. Sometimes my wife would bring cookies in. I'd try to make it real easy. But Cory, at the end of every conference, that I tried to be affirmative and I tried to be positive. You know what every teacher said? Whew, thank God that's over with.
Right.
The Neil Simon statement. Same time next year. Now, do we want commitment or do we want compliance?
Mm-hmm.
I think commitment is coming forth with our partnership coaching. Teacher after teacher over 10 years working with Casey say it's the most transformational PD they've ever had, because Jim Knight is right. We do not know what it looks like when we do what we do.
Mm-hmm. We hear the same thing from our coaching program, right? Where it's all around that video piece and the teachers reflecting themselves and, being focused within that work, but allowing that video to just kind of be that objective artifact that fosters the dialogue, right? It's the fodder for that back and forth conversation. And I mean, it's so much more transformational than someone coming in and saying, hey, I noticed that you did this while you were busy doing all the other things you were doing at the front of the room. I noticed this. Have you noticed that? If you haven't noticed it, it's fine. Go ahead and try this. It'll fix it. And then we'll talk, right? It doesn't give it maybe short-term, success, but not necessarily long-term success. It doesn't shift their mindset. It doesn't build their capacity to be able to do those things. So I think that's so powerful. We have a question coming in from Kim Ramadan. If we want to answer that, Casey, it looked like you had something else you wanted to add. Do you want to add that before we
just
go to our question?
So we can get to the question? I think that coaching is like leadership, and I think that the term that we've talked about a lot, and clearly there are great programs, but it's people, not programs. So when we did a program evaluation of the video coaching that we had implemented in another district, there were several themes that came out qualitatively, but really the coach is a big part of it, along with the video. But coming in, like you said, Cory, and it's not you did this, you did that. you almost have to, yes, you're an expert and you earn the job of coach for many, many reasons,
Right.
but almost coming into that relationship with the teachers that you're working with, that you don't know everything, and that you know that, and you also share that you don't know everything, and really we're working together, and it's that partnership. So, let's learning to how to prompt people to kind of come to the conclusion on their own, because that is the definition of leadership, when you lead people somewhere where they don't necessarily want to go, and you make it think that that's their idea. So
Right.
helping, asking the type of questions that have them reflect and don't come off in an accusatory or authoritative way is so important in that coaching relationship.
Yeah, and I'm sharing on our screen the takeaways for today's episode, which folks can download from our Learning Center, or if you've signed up for or subscribed for our show, you can get these straight in your inbox. But it's this quote right here that we get again. Another Ted Lassoism: "Be curious, not judgmental." And I think if we can stay curious, we can transfer that curiosity over to our teachers, right? The ones who are in the driver's seat, who are the ones who should be owning the learning, and that's just so powerful. And it's a great segue. Your addition to that there, Casey, is a great segue to our question from Kim Ramadan, who says, what would you do if what a teacher wants to work on and what the students need are different? How do you build that curiosity? How do you maintain that curiosity, that judgment-free zone? Any tips for that's been a big theme this month, especially as we've talked about empowering our teachers. A lot of our folks are like, yes, but how do I empower them and get them on the right track I feel they should be on? So ideas or tips for this scenario?
Well, you know what? I'm just going to follow Jim Knight. I said, if we're building trust, and we outline to folks that you're going to look at a video and you are going to identify a goal that you want to work on, and then we have dialogue about that, and the teacher says, no, I really want to work on this, and the coach has to ask some questions. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you right now?
I love using the scale.
And the big question is, what would the students be doing differently if it were a 10? And engage in it. And if the teacher says, yeah, okay, and we have that dialogue, I really want to work on that, I'd work on that goal. And we would video again and see, well, where are the kids with your goal and the strategies that we dialogued about? Have they advanced? If they have, hallelujah. If they haven't, let's talk about this a little bit. But I don't think we jettison the teacher's goal right up front after we talk. We share with them that, it's your goal.
Yeah.
Right.
It goes back to the saying, Jim and I used to use this when we were administrators together. And it's often used, what hill do you want to die on? So if you're going to start out and you're going to come out of the gate hard and say, hey, your goal is not this goal it should be, I think that you at least could go through a couple of cycles where letting that teacher identify that goal. And just as Jim did so well in articulating, then you can weave in some additional prompts and questions to maybe, and I think that's the art and craft of coaching. And that's why I don't think everybody could be a coach, is because it takes some of that patience in leading them to those answers themselves.
Yeah, a big part of what I do sounds very similar to what Jim does as he works with coaches there in your district is really helping our coaches, let go of some of the misconceptions that, you mentioned it too, Casey, the coach is the expert, right? Where you can bring expertise in, but if you sit in that pedestal of I'm the expert, then you feel the need, you feel the urge to, do all the heavy lifting. And again, short-term results, not long-term results. So yeah, definitely. Kim says thanks for that response. And I really have had more conversations, I feel, this year with instructional leaders who are, facilitating coaching conversations, saying, okay, how do I let go? How do I let them drive? What are some ways? And you have to work at it, right? So this is where, we talk about video for the teacher being this huge catalyst for learning and change, and that rocket fuel. I love that quote from Jim Knight, rocket fuel for learning. But it can also be that for us as coaches, as instructional leaders. So if that's something that you're struggling with, or you're wanting to put a lens on, do it. Literally put a lens on it and record those conversations, and see how you're doing with your questioning. Y'all have mentioned some really great resources. Jim Knight's got some great resources, some follow-up questions to help kind of further define that teacher-driven goal too. So those are great. Well, gentlemen, we're at the end of our episode. I feel like we could chat forever about leadership and coaching and the power of video. So I really appreciate you coming on as guests again this season. And I know we'll have you back again and see you again soon. Any last minute words for our audience, whether it's a tip or a motivational something? What do you got for us today?
Well, let me steal one from Ted Lasso. All right. He says, teachers are like great albums. Everyone can think of at least one that changed their life. So I know there's one teacher that changed everybody's life out there. And to those people, thank you so very much. Thank you for being there for kids.
Yeah, excellent, Jim. Absolutely. I think that when I think about the big picture and where we are and where we want to be, doctors are important, attorneys are important, but teaching and education is what changes the future. So I want to thank all of our teachers for all of their efforts. You have some of the most important work, and the work that you do will pay dividends for your children and grandchildren. And I just can't thank you enough for all of your efforts, and especially under these very difficult conditions. There will be better days, and keep the faith.
Absolutely. And rest. We've got one more coach replay episode. I think just one more before the end of the year. Next week, we'll be talking about 3 ways you can reflect on your coaching for those of you who are looking at some ways that you can unplug and reflect a little bit over winter break. But everyone, we thank you so much for continuing to follow the Coach Replay show or joining us if you're brand new. Jim and Casey, thank you so much. Have a wonderful holiday break, and I know we'll see you all again soon. Thanks for joining.
Happy holidays.
Having us. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.